got to start with the customer experience and work backwards to the technology.
Houston, we have a problem.
What's the problem?
And that is, everything around you that you call life was made up by people that were no smarter than you.
Son, we live in a world that requires revenue, and that revenue must be brought in by people with elite skills.
Hello, and welcome to Ready Product Radio, a weekly audio podcast for, with, and about product people of all disciplines. Ready Product Radio will feature guests and their stories about how they ready themselves and their products for success. My name is Alan Neal, and I am a 20-year veteran of the B2B enterprise software industry, as well as a serious podcast addict. Each week, join me as we navigate the deep waters and rocky shores of the product world together. Are you a product manager, product marketer, UX designer, or other product-related professional? If yes, then Ready Product Radio wants to be an entertaining, inspiring, and informative resource for you and your product team. Surprises in business can be costly. When it comes to product, it pays to be ready. Welcome, Ready Product Radio heads. Today's episode focuses on Ready Product Principle 0, which is begin with the customer experience. This episode features an interview with Paul Lewis, CTO of Hitachi Canada. Paul is a Disney fanatic. He's been there 37 times. And in this episode, Paul talks about how the Disney experience can be deconstructed to be a guideline for all of us in terms of how to deliver a world-class customer experience with our products or services. Enjoy. Paul Lewis, welcome to Ready Product Radio. You and I have worked together in the past, but for the value of our listeners, can you give us a quick introduction of yourself and your current role?
Sure. My name is Paul Lewis. I'm the Chief Technology Officer for Hitachi Canada. My role primarily is to lead the technology team when it comes to field enablement, specifically for a variety of the brands and offerings that Hitachi provides. But we have what we refer to as many majors. So I have a few majors. So I lead the Canadian technology team, but I also lead the analytics team for the Americas, and I do a lot of evangelism for the Americas, especially when it comes to cloud, converged analytics, big data, just CIO mentorship, that kind of stuff.
Excellent, excellent. So I'm hoping we can probably do a few of these, Paul, because you and I could probably talk for 6 or 8 hours on those topics. But I had three specific topics I thought we'd kick this one off with. One, I know you're a huge Disney fan, and I've always wanted to talk to you about Disney and how that can be translated to for product people to better understand how to deliver an awesome user experience. I'm assuming that's why you keep going back there. I also know you've led product management teams, you've led technology teams. Now, as you say, you've got quite a varied leadership. So second topic I'd like to cover is cross-functional alignment, and any thoughts you have there about teams better understanding each other's positions, better able to work together. So that's number two. And then third, I know a lot of what you're doing right now is in the data space, and a lot of products are increasingly becoming more and more data-centric. So I want to talk about data. So those three topics sound okay?
Awesome. Look forward to it.
Awesome. So let's start with probably your favorite, which is Disney. So tell us how many times you've been to Disney, why you keep going back, and then if you can, connect that with product and user experience, and maybe some insights that product people can take away from Disney as a product, if you will.
So I certainly talk about this a lot. In fact, every blog I insert some sort of insider Disney joke, and most people may not see it or get it, but at least it humors me. It gives me something an Easter egg I provide for myself. But I've been there. I'm rolling through my 37th time.
Wow.
I do a couple times a year, right? I do the one for the family and one for just me. But in fairness, the one for just me tends to align to some sort of conference, right? I'm rarely just sort of picking up and jumping on a plane and going to Disney. But I like to talk about the Disney hug in many ways, right? So you can call that the user experience, or just call that experience in general. I know when I land in Florida and I get on the Disney Magical Express, from that point forward, I don't need to be in control. You're in control the vast majority of your life. You have to determine when you're going to get on the train, when you're going to go there, when you're going to go to work, when you're going to eat. When it comes to Disney, you've done a lot of pre-planning, but as soon as you land, you get on that bus, they take care of you. You now have no worries. You don't have any money worries because you've already prepaid. You have no quality worries because you know everything you go to and all your experiences are going to be the highest quality possible. They exist for your entertainment. They exist for your satisfaction. So for your weeks-long time, they're really giving you that hug. Every single cast member, every single interaction exists for the purpose of pleasing you, which is exactly what you want from a product management experience. Right?
Good.
You want the person consuming your services to appreciate that you appreciate them in many ways. Yeah.
Excellent. So if I can unpack that a little bit, I think there's a couple attributes I hear in there. One is you must have a really, really strong level of trust with Disney that I guess they've built up over the years, in the sense that you don't question the experience that you're going to get. Is that correct?
Absolutely, but in fairness, that took a few times to get there.
Okay.
So first time attending Disney, you're not going to have that trust.
Okay.
You're going to assume it's just like any other vacation. You're going to plan too much or too little, and you're going to presume that you control the experience yourself. But once you stop that process and let Disney control it on your behalf, all of a sudden it becomes a lifestyle versus a vacation in many ways. But it takes time to do that. That's not the first 5. That's from 5 to 30, where you sort of get that action.
Excellent. And the other thing that I want to unpack from what you said is I think around consistency. It sounds like from what you're saying there are no curtains that you can peek behind. There are no kinks in the armor. That level of that hug, let's use that. That's a great term. It is consistent in every aspect of the experience. Is that part of the magic, you think?
It's absolutely consistent on stage.
Okay.
But I've had the opportunity, because I've been so many times, to go off stage.
Okay.
In fact, I've spent days off stage. I've spent good time with Imagineers. I've spent a good time with the actual management staff backstage, determining how things are in control. And it is far more hectic backstage.
Okay.
There are far more things behind the screen than in front of the screen. So if you're looking at Disney World itself, there's 42 square miles.
Yeah.
On stage might be 5 square miles. Backstage is where they do all the laundry and where do they do all the cooking, where do they do all the transportation, and where they do all the horticulture. Like even if you look at any one flower, any one tree, any one hedge, those are duplicated somewhere else. So if on stage is looking like it's not up to par, it's not up to snuff, it's not ready for camera, then they have the ability at night to replace that bush, that flower, that tree, so that the next morning it looks like it's fresh and new.
Excellent.
Right? And that takes time, that takes energy, that assumes that things are going to go wrong, and that you're prepared for that eventuality, and not weeks later, but overnight.
Excellent. Good. So what? Any other before we get off the Disney topics? Any other secret sauce or key to their success? Do you think? Is it? We talked about the delivery. We talked about the consistency of that, building up the trust. Is there anything else do you think that they're doing that just general product people? If I'm building a SaaS software product, an analytics product that I can learn from Disney in terms of how to have a customer experience? There's
certainly a lot of technology enablement. So when you look at Magic Kingdom itself, you're essentially sitting on the 3rd floor of a building, right? When you're walking as a guest, you're on the 3rd floor, and there's utilidors behind it, and that's how any one cast member will get from part A to part B of the business. And what's interesting about that is the technology that they enable to control the crowd exists within a room. Right, so they go in a room, they watch the video, they see live interaction of guests in crowds, and they have the ability to manipulate entertainment and attraction to disperse those crowds. So if there's a lot of people in the Jungle Cruise, and it's a 90-minute wait. They've got to think about increasing that time to 120 minutes, even though it's not 120 minutes, just to force people to move to another attraction. They will create another attraction, and it might be a 30-minute wait, but they'll reduce it to 15, so it looks more attractive to people who move over there. They might create a impromptu parade or an impromptu sidewalk attraction to which will move the crowd if it's having some issues. That technology enablement and people enablement is adding to the wowness, to the hug. That's sort of the onstage aspect. Which we need to think about from a product management perspective. It's not just the screen, right? It's not just the user interface. It's what we can do on their behalf behind the scenes, so that they don't have to think to do it. What can we predictively appreciate what their next step is going to be versus making them press the button? As an example.
No, I'm glad you said predictably, because there's a word that's being used more and more, anticipation. Can you anticipate your user, your customer's needs? And because that just has a good feeling when, the next thing that happens is what I wanted to happen next.
Exactly. And you don't actually have to do the work, right? You don't have to push the button behind the scenes, but at least narrow their options. Right? So there's a lot of functions in MS Word. There's thousands of functions. And you don't necessarily know what they want to do next. But having watched 1 million people use Word, you should really be able to narrow it down to 3. Right? And say, here's the next 3 things you're most likely to do versus the 997 things you could possibly do. Good. So I would kind of characterize what you just said there as logistics. That it sounds like you're saying Disney, from an operational perspective, really has nailed the logistics. You mentioned swapping out the plants. You mentioned that they've got it sounds like some, massive network control center where they're basically watching everybody and doing crowd control and things like that. So logistics, would be fair to say that's a 100%,
core competency?
But it's not for logistics for the sake of good planning. It's logistics to ensure a consistent experience.
Excellent.
Right? It's to ensure that every time you go, all 37 times I've gone, it has been, in fact, the same experience. The same tree that I sit at and have lunch at is not the same tree that I sit at and have lunch at, but it certainly looks like it. Right?
That's excellent. Yeah, and the comfort that you must get from that, because, like you say, in life in general, that kind of predictability, that kind of reliability, that kind of comfort is not all that available. So that's good. Last thing on Disney, Paul, the thing I read, I think maybe it was about a year ago now, but it sounds like they've really adopted the whole wearables thing as well. Is it true that when you go there, you get a band, and you said you don't have to worry about money or anything? Everything's in that band, and that's your identity to them, that's your payment to them, that's your schedule to them. Is that correct? Or
100% true. It's called the Magic Band.
Right.
It's not that different than the Key to the World, which was sort of the
plastic version?
The plastic version that existed more for the purpose of opening your room door, but then also did things like getting you into the park and doing purchases, things like that. But it felt more like the resort experience versus the Disney experience. So they changed that to a wearable, so it felt more like a Disney experience. So you receive that at home before you even arrive. You put that on before you even get on the airplane, so that your Disney experience starts at home. Your Disney experience doesn't start when you get to the gate, right? So now you have your Magic Band with your own color and your own name on it. It feels like your vacation has started 3 weeks before the vacation has started. Nice. The smallest of kids to the oldest of grandparents all have these things. But yes, it is an RFID that controls your entire vacation. You've determined what your fast passes are going to be. You've determined what your entire dining agenda is going to be. You've determined what your what parks you want to access at what time, where your resort's going to be, what food you want to collect, your credit cards on it. So there is value to the personification of that thing, and that it sort of acts like you on your behalf. But then the technology side effect of that is they're collecting a whole bunch of new and interesting data, which goes into that logistics machine to make crowd control even better. Right? So it's adding to that machine so that there's value for everybody, not just value for you personally.
Right. Yeah. Excellent. Good. Good stuff. Well, let's move on. I wanna be respectful of your time here. So second topic to talk about was switching gears here. You and I worked together. You were a VP of Product Management. I know also you've been leadership roles in development and technology. Now you're in the CTO role, and you've got oversight of a bunch of different kind of stakeholders. So I wanted our audience to get an appreciation from you on having been in each of those teams. What can you share in terms of how those teams can better understand each other and better work together to produce that consistent product, that consistent experience? Because I know historically, a lot of times the view is that the product people see the techies as just wanting to work with cool technology. They don't understand the business. The techies see the product people as basically just overhead, don't understand what they do. They're always on planes or at conferences or something. So can you give me a sense from your experience of how, getting the benefit of specialization, we can have more of a harmonious team, building products and kind of share that vision and do that Disney-style consistent experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been incredibly privileged in my career that I've had a very broad perspective, right? Yeah. So I started in the development world, like actually coding systems, and then leading teams of coders. So I've sort of managed the application development world. I've managed the technology architectural world, both on the software and infrastructure. We've worked together in the management capacity of product management, from a very small 2-person team to a relatively large 35-person team. Yep. I've also been in the sales world. In fact, a good portion of my role now is more of a field enablement, more specifically about sort of being the face of the organization, being the outward projection, and then sort of even the product engineering side. So I've worked in organizations that exist for the purpose of being the buyer of technology, and worked for organizations that is purpose of selling technology, and as small as a piece of software to as large as a bullet train. Right there, it's vast. And I consider that a privilege because it's giving me experience and perspective, both as somebody who would consume hundreds of millions of dollars worth of stuff, and somebody who would sell hundreds of millions worth of stuff, and gone from a team of 5 people to 5,000 people in the delivery of that stuff. Right. So I would say that there is very little value in trying to get everybody on the same page. You are not going to get a developer, an architect, a product manager, a salesperson, and the client all singing in the same hymn book. It's just not going to happen. And really what you want to make the individual disciplines better at what they do, not better at understanding what somebody else does. I'd rather have the best developer, the best product manager, the best sales guy than mediocre team that can do everything in many ways. Because the best programmer I can have is the highest quality product I can receive. The best product manager I have will have the best user experience for a client. The best salesperson I have will be the best and most important revenue part of the organization. All right. I think what brings these teams together to make a more effective or more popular product, or the one that's going to win in terms of the competitive offerings, is simply purpose. Okay. So it is very easy for the developers or the architects to implement technology wizardry and to want to implement the best new thing. It's very easy for product to ignore technology and focus on features and functions and screens. It's very easy for sales to not care about the features and functions and sell the future. Right. But when you change their habits to the perspective of the purpose of what we're doing here is to enable an industry, enable a client, enable a company to perform a business function, and your job is to technologically make that true, feature-wise make that true, sales experience make that true, architecturally make that true, everybody's aligned. So do what you do best, but make sure the ultimate purpose of what you do is purpose. Right. Making sure that business person, that client, can actually perform that business function. Not perform the technology function, but to earn their own revenue versus you earning your own revenue. Because that's what a buyer wants, right? The buyer wants to come to you and say, I have a business problem that either I have an efficiency issue or a revenue issue or a growth issue. Solve that issue for me.
Right.
Don't just give me a feature that I might have to figure out how it affects my growth. Solve my growth problem.
Right.
So if we all as a team have that same purpose, we're all going to drive to that end result.
Yeah. No, that's good. And so if I can unpack what you're saying there, having a shared vision, a shared purpose. A lot of what I'm seeing lately, is a focus on stories, and I don't mean user stories from an agile perspective, although that comes in, but basically the world in general, the product world in general, coming around to the notion that how people connect with each other is through stories, right? So would it be fair for me to take your kind of focus on purpose and say, if we align with the stories about the problems we're trying to solve with our customers, that those shared stories, again, not at the agile level of an agile development team, but those shared stories in terms of an industry, a set of problems, that having that's the consistent mythology, if you will, that you want to have across your organization.
As long as that story is ultimately revolving around solving the problem and not about the process to solve the problem.
Right. It's not about the product, it's about the problem.
Absolutely, because it's highly likely that the actual business problem will be solved with more than just the product you're selling. Right? It's highly likely it's a people-based thing, it's a time-based thing, it's an opportunity-based thing, and it's a thing they're about to buy from you. Right? It's all have to happen. And you have to be aware of that as the seller. Right? You have to be aware that just by clicking this button, I'm not going to earn revenue. But by clicking this button in a great channel, and they had their own great client, and it happened to be in a great pricing opportunity, that's where they're going to solve that business problem. Right. It's the client's ecosystem, not your ecosystem. Right. It's not your button, even though your button is awesome. It's not just your button.
So broader focus.
Yeah, exactly. Now we spend a good portion of our time in sort of software product management. Recently, I've spent a good portion of my time in infrastructure or things product management. Very, very different, right? So when I'm looking at an MRI machine or a bullet train or an excavator or an elevator, different concept, right? Because the investment to build the new thing is hundreds of millions of dollars versus a year and 30 people, right? The product management aspect of that is to ensure public safety more than it is features and functions, right? It has to do things, but it also has to stop, right? It also has to land. It also has to get people from floor 1 to floor 3, right? Because it's a thing, the perspective is a little bit different, and it's easier to appreciate what business problem you're solving. If this is the fastest elevator in the world, but it never opens the door on the 5th floor, you're not solving the business problem. Right? It can't be buggy. Right? You can't go and deploy it and say, well, it goes through floor 1 through 4. It just hasn't, next version, it'll be floor 5.
Workaround.
Exactly. There's no workarounds in the physical world. Right? That train has to stop. That plane has to land. We're software, we have a little bit more, privilege. And it doesn't have to have a level of perfection that physical equipment need to have.
And your incremental cost of the next items sold, we're so proud about that in software that it's zero. We talk about it being zero. It's not in that hardware world. So if you have a bug, quote unquote, that can get very expensive if that bug is spread across, let's say, 1,000 units. It gets pretty pricey.
It effectively makes that machine to be replaced, right? The next version of the train is another train. Right? It's not new software, right? It's another train I now have to put on the track and pay for. Right?
And you're not calling a guy in at midnight and it's going to be up and running at 8 a.m. either.
Right.
That's good. No, that's another aspect of your experience. So the difference between bits, managing products based on bits versus atoms.
Right.
But you can the Google thing.
You can take the physical equipment and apply some of that logic to software too. Where you can say, if this software was living, if this software was a thing, how would I treat it differently? And maybe you don't change. Maybe your process is the same. Maybe your people are the same. But if you look at it differently, you might treat it differently. You might say, this needs to be entirely replaceable. I might be able to, from an agile perspective, promote a new set of user stories. But you've got to think to yourself, there may in fact be a situation where I can't just promote another feature, that I might have to replace this entire thing. And what does that mean? What is the potential impact of having to replace the entire thing?
Yeah, got it. Yeah, that's interesting. Let's transition, Paul, because I don't want to take up too much of your time. But one of the things that I certainly see is this transition to, 2 years ago it was hyped as big data. Now it's being hyped as wearables and things like Apple Watch and signals being generated. But basically, we are in a reality. We're past the hype cycle, it seems, whereby any technology product has to deal with a ton more data coming in from all these signal generating devices, and be able to manage that. So I know that's a big part of what you're doing, even though, like you say, you're focused on a lot of products that are physical, that they're atoms, right? There's a lot of bits behind those. Can you talk a little bit about how people and product teams can be ready to start thinking about more data centric? Like what I want to focus on is getting that data centricity into the DNA of products, because I know it's not something you can think of after the fact, right? And layer in. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Let's talk about purpose again, because I keep coming back to that word, but it's almost true in every conversation, right?
Sure.
So purpose of why this is true, you have to look at society in general. So what's the biggest impact to societal change over time? What's your thoughts? Biggest impact to societal change over time?
I would say communication and communication-related technologies.
Not even that granular.
Okay.
The biggest impact to societal change is population growth.
Okay.
Right? There's 7.3 billion people on Earth right now.
Okay.
It took a long time to get to 7.3 billion.
Yeah.
In 25 years, we're going to add another 1.5 billion. Much smaller period of time as compared it took to the 7.3.
Yeah. So accelerating growth.
Absolutely. Most of those people are going to live urban, right? And because most of those people are going to live urban, we're going to move to what some people refer to as super cities, 10 to 15 million person cities. So imagine what the impact to the world is. Imagine the impact to resources. It's going to take a lot of resources to build a city of that magnitude. And I'm going to eliminate a lot of resources for the land of a city of that magnitude. If I look at transportation, if you think you have an hour commute now, imagine your 3-hour commute in a 15 million person city. Yeah. Look at healthcare. I'm going to have a lot more people, and you spend a lot more money in the last 20% of your lifespan. How do I have to change sort of the operations of medicine to support moving that earlier in somebody's life? And then you just look at things simply like security or public safety. The reality is, if you think there's pickpockets in a 50,000 person stadium, imagine a 250,000 person stadium, right? So they make massive changes by this massive population growth to society, and we've got to think about, as businesses that support the society, what that means to us. Okay. And what a Gartner or an IDC or a Forrester says, there are 4 big things that are affecting sort of your business strategy. And you know these, everybody knows these, right? It's mobile and social is the middle 2, right? Yep. Mobile, any new workloads I create, any new offerings I create, any new business I operate will likely have a mobile interface to my community and a new social interaction, right? So it's not good enough that you have a 1,000-person contact center. I need to interact with you in 500 different social ways, right? Interact based on the type of person you are, type of age you are, the type of technology innovation that you have. And mobile, even though I still have 4,000 applications, the new ones I create are going to be mobile. So this new mobile and social world are creating a significant more and diverse data, right? It's not just your 4,000 applications, 4,000 databases. It is a dramatic growth in terms of the data that those things are going to produce. Right. And all that has to sit in a highly virtual, highly elastic, highly OpEx consumable infrastructure model called cloud. Right. So these 4 things, Gartner nexus of forces, or whatever you want to call it, is the business drivers. Right. So the society drivers and the business drivers are creating technology drivers, and the biggest technology driver to those things is Internet of Things, right? So there are 25 billion things on Earth. Exactly. Yeah. In 5 years, very, very small, there'll be 50 billion things, right? That's a lot. Now, in fairness, we're not just building another 25 billion things. We're we're going to take existing things and put IPs on them,
Yeah,
right?
right.
And they're going to start to talk to each other,
Yeah.
and they're going to start to talk to a centralized server, and there's going to start to create autonomous implementations of the things that they're doing, right? So the things are producing 1,000 times more data than the mobile and social are already producing, which is 10 times more than your databases are.
Right.
So now you've got databases that has a 10% growth, 10 times more growth in the new business opportunities, and then 1,000 times more growth in the actual things they're doing. So if I look at, products that need to be created and programs and projects that need to be created, they're probably going to be data centric, right?
Yeah.
They're probably going to be analytics centric because I want to create new value to the data. It's probably data lifecycle type projects to deal with even saving and moving that information across platforms. And any new business value I create is likely going to be based on the value that I find in this big data lake thing that I'm going to create, right? So my new products and projects are based on all this new data and all these things that get produced. And so the new innovations that are going to come out will have that data centricity in many ways.
Yeah.
I don't know if that gives you...
Yeah, no, it does. So the example, I think where this really hit me, being kind of, fairly late in my career and not, growing up with this as just, that's the way the world is, like my kids. Yeah. It was Google Now. When, when Google started, without me asking for it or even thinking about it, say, hey, Ellen, you better hit the road because you've got an appointment at X and it's going to take you Y to get there, so why don't you get moving? I think that's when me, and for a lot of other people I think as well, started to say, hey, wait a second, this is a whole new world that we're moving into. Any other examples that you can think of like that people can use as analogs or as clues of how to start thinking about information and how to deliver, to connect it to that user experience, right?
There's actually something called the paradigms of big data, right? And it sort of boils down into three. So the first one is about the data that organizations will collect. The goal of big data is to create new value for you, right? And you know that when you walk into a store or walking down the street that there's video surveillance, they're probably recording who you are.
Right.
But it's not all that transparent. So the first paradigm is that they're collecting information on you, but it's not transparent for you in any way.
Right.
But it's true because you know that when you walk in that store, you'd love to get a text that says, hey, there's 30% off this thing that I usually buy. Right? So we've got to think about the transparency impacts to big data, even though it's going to provide value to you.
Right.
The second one's more about identity, where the goal of big data is always to provide a personalized piece of value. So when I walk into that department store and I walk down the aisles and I look at that chocolate bar and I may or may not want it, and 30 seconds later I walk away, I do want to get that text, oh, this is half off. Great, well then maybe I'll go buy it. And 70% of the time you'll probably go buy it. But it's a personalized service. It's something that you're going to get value from. If I walk by a Starbucks, I'm going to get notification that my favorite drink is available for you. Or I've pre-ordered it, and by the time I show up, I'm picking it up and walking out because all the prepayment's already been done. Or when I walk by a Disney ride, it's buzzed and tell me that my fast pass is 5 minutes away, so go and wait for 5 minutes or go directly on it, right? Unfortunately, the more data that you collect in a big data world, the less they have the ability to identify an individual. The more likely they'll put you in a group, right? So you as an individual drive this kind of car, this kind of education, have this kind of job in a group setting likes vanilla ice cream. But you personally like chocolate ice cream. The problem is when you go into that store, because they can't identify you individually, they will give you a discount coupon for chocolate ice cream. Or for vanilla ice cream.
Right.
That's the problem, right?
Yep.
It seeks to provide value to the individual, but it risks identifying you into a group because it has too much to deal with, right? The technology to do the analytics hasn't caught up. And the last one's much more about power and closer to home for us when we spend a good portion of our time in financial services.
Sure.
Imagine a world where you have full control right now to do a credit card application. Because when I fill in my credit card form, when I send it to a lender, they're going to pull a credit bureau, and we are in full control. We know if we've paid all our debts in the past. So our score is relatively in this range. It's good, bad, or indifferent. And we know that they have to make a decision on that credit card application based on the information I gave them in the beacon score.
Right.
But imagine if the power shifted and they said, you know what, while that's good, interesting information, I want to use more and different information that you didn't give me, but is publicly available. So I'm going to go look at your tweets, and I'm going to look at people who have subscribed to your Twitter feed. I'm going to go to your Facebook. I'm going to go to your blogging. I'm going to go to your podcast, and I'm going to do an evaluation on whether I feel that you're the type of person I want to do business with, and that'll determine whether, in fact, I want to approve your loan or not.
Right.
So now the shift has entirely moved to the lender, because it's not just in your control anymore. They've made some external factor, even though it's public information, to determine whether you're going to approve the deal. So the power will in fact shift there, even though the ultimate value is to give you a much more prescribed product, financial product to go forward with.
Yeah, interesting. Good. Well, I think we're probably running up on time, Paul. I'd love to talk to you all day about these things. Very interesting topics. But maybe we can get together and do this again in a couple months.
Happy to do so.
Excellent. So, what can you share with our audience in terms of if people want to follow you, your blog, if people want to contact you, something that you've said that they want to get some more information on? What are you comfortable sharing in terms of how to follow and get a hold of Paul Lewis?
So always easy to contact me electronically.
Okay.
Very difficult to see me in person. I travel, a couple 100,000 miles a year. But Twitter at Paul Lewis HDS, website paullewishds.com, LinkedIn / Paul Lewis HDS, readily available to see.
Paul Lewis HDS.
Paul Lewis HDS.
If you remember that,
you're good to go.
You're good to go. Okay. Well, I'd like to thank you, Paul. We're sitting here in your office at Hitachi. I appreciate you taking the time and sharing your thoughts, and definitely take you up on that offer. Maybe in a few months, schedules permitting, we can get together, because I think on any one of these three topics we talked about this morning, we could go into a lot more details. So,
thank you very much.
Experience. Thanks for sharing it. Thank you for listening to this episode of Ready Product Radio, part of the Ready PDM network. This is when most podcasters ask you to leave a review on iTunes if you like the show. My only request is, if you found the show entertaining, inspiring, or informative, please share it with a colleague or friend who may feel the same way. Also, note that the views expressed in this episode do not necessarily reflect my views or the views of the Ready PDM network. If you want yourself or your product to be ready, then keep your eyes on your markets, your ears to your customers, your mind on their experiences, both good and bad, and finally, keep your hearts in your products. Until next time, thank you for listening. You can contact us on Twitter at Ready Product Radio. That's RDYPRODUCTRADIO. And on the web at www.readyproductradio.com.
What do you want to do tonight?
The same thing we do every night, Pinky. Try to take over the world.
You're sitting on a chair and you lean back so you just on two legs, and then you lean too far and you almost fall over, but just at the last second you catch yourself. I feel like that all the time.
The following sound clips and samples were used in the intro and extra of this episode. All respective rights reserved by the owners of these. Are You Ready by DJ Darrow. Start with the Customer Experience quote by Stephen Jobs. Are You Ready by DJ Bart. Houston, We Have a Problem, Tom Hanks from the movie Apollo 13. What's the Problem? Quote of Brad Pitt from the movie Moneyball. Are You Ready by Bonassus. Everything Around You quote by Stephen Jobs. You Can't Handle the Truth spoof of the speech from A Few Good Men by G News TV. You Know That Feeling? Joke by comedian Stephen Wright. Pinky and the Brain children's TV show. What Are We Going to Do Tonight, Wayne? Are You Still Here? Quote of Matthew Broderick from the end of the movie Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Copyrights for these materials are the sole property of the respective holders and have been used here without permission and without profit.
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.